Is about to unfold, a presidential inauguration unlike any ever seen before in this country. This is President Donald Trump's last full day as president. In a little more than 24 hours, Joe Biden will be sworn in as the 46th president of the United States. But this transition and this transfer of power has been anything but peaceful. And the country is anything but united right now. As political analyst Ron Brownstein put it, America is more divided than any time since the Civil War, making it crystal clear the enormous task ahead for Joe Biden and his team. He'll inherit an incredible set of challenges, division, chaos, and in the midst of a deadly pandemic that Donald Trump has all but forgotten, it was his job to lead. President Trump will be leaving office with 400,000 Americans killed from coronavirus and millions of jobs lost on his watch. So we are also keeping a very close eye on the White House today. As we know, Donald Trump has taped something of a farewell address. No word yet, though, what he's actually said in that recording or when it will be released. But he hasn't been seen in public in 7 days, and he's expected to issue about maybe as many as 100 pardons and commutations as he heads out the door. A lot could be happening this hour. We're covering all of the angles ahead of this historic day. CNN's John Harwood, he's live at the White House. CNN's MJ Lee is in Wilmington, Delaware, covering President-elect Joe Biden. John, what exactly are you expecting from President Trump in his final full day in office?
Well, it's a bit of a mystery, Kate, because Donald Trump has stayed out of view. He suffered such a psychological blow from losing the election that he's mostly been hiding out from cameras, bathing in this fantasy that he actually won the election and it was stolen from him. And one of the few sets of public remarks he made was that speech on January 6th that now left him with legal exposure for the deadly insurrection that followed. So we don't expect a live farewell address, as presidents usually do. Instead, he's going to have some tape remarks released at some point, presumably praising accomplishments, perhaps economic, perhaps with judicial appointments of his administration. We also expect him to issue a raft of pardons. Just don't know how long that list is going to be, whether it includes himself, his family members. That's all going to be made clear over the next 24 hours, but we don't know the answers to that yet.
And MJ, what are we going to see from President-elect Biden today?
Well, he is, first of all, saying goodbye to Wilmington, Delaware. This is where he has been hunkered down throughout the pandemic, where the transition work really took place and where the campaign, the 2020 campaign, really came to an end during COVID-19. And then, of course, he is going to be heading down to Washington, D.C. Initially, he had really hoped that he could take the Amtrak train down to the nation's capital, but he is no longer doing that because of heightened security concerns. And then tonight, when he gets to Washington, D.C., both he and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be attending a memorial at the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool. This is to honor the lives of so many that have been lost during the COVID-19 pandemic and really sets a somber tone as we head into Inauguration Day. And speaking of, tomorrow morning, we are getting new details of how Biden will be spending his time. He is going to be going to church services in the morning in Washington, D.C., and invited members of congressional leadership. And among those joining him will be Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell. Just a very stark reminder of two Republicans that we are seeing showing a sign of deference and respect on Inauguration Day, something that he has not gotten from the outgoing President Donald Trump.
Yeah, no kidding. John, to the end of what Donald Trump is doing or isn't doing, let me read just a little bit of reporting from our colleagues on the president's kind of final moments and where his head is, if you will. This is a reporting from our colleagues. While he's eagerly anticipating his military-style send-off from Joint Base Andrews on Inauguration morning, one of the few things that had cheered him up recently, there were already signs the crowd may be smaller than he'd hoped. And a slate of actual celebrities lined up for Biden's inauguration has disappointed a president who tried and often failed to secure A-list support for his own presidency. I'm struck by I don't know how to put it other than just how small this really is. Like on his way out the door, John, he really still cares so much about crowd size.
Kate, Donald Trump requires constant affirmation for his self-image and for the image that he projects to other people. So he's going to try to conjure up some sort of honor send-off, flying off not as the ex-president, which is typically what happens after an inauguration, but flying off while he's still president, still can command salutes from the military, while his plane is still Air Force One. He can't concede to Joe Biden. He can't extend the normal courtesies to Joe Biden. But the reality is that no matter how many people he gets to show up to Andrews Air Force Base, his legacy is going to be of someone who was unfit for the job, who was the only president to be impeached twice, might ultimately be the only president who was convicted by the Senate. We don't know that yet. And he's somebody who spent 4 years deepening American divisions to the point that it resulted in a violent threat to American democracy itself. It's a very ugly legacy for Donald Trump.
An ugly legacy and a mess, MJ, that Joe Biden is walking into. In 24 hours, essentially, it's going to be his mess. What are you hearing from the transition about where they're focused, how they're feeling as they head in?
Well, they're aware of the reality that Joe Biden is going to be inheriting multiple national crises, COVID-19 being at the top of that list. They are fully aware just what a daunting task he has to try to get COVID under control. The vaccines distributed quickly. He has set this ambitious goal of 100 million vaccine shots in the first 100 days in office. And there are so many things they feel like they don't know. And the Biden presidency and the success of the Biden presidency will hinge so much on whether he can get COVID under control and whether he can turn things around and address sort of this nation that is in crisis and a nation that is grieving the many deaths that they have seen. Also, the economic impact, right? It goes hand in hand with the COVID crisis. And that is why he has proposed already this $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. We are about to find out whether he is able to get something ambitious like that done and work with Congress to get money into the pockets of the American people that have been suffering. And then finally, the other national crisis that he's going to be facing is the division. This is why we are going to be seeing probably speech that will hit really hard on themes of national unity, of national healing. Perhaps not a surprise, because this is a Joe Biden that we have heard over and over again throughout the campaign, throughout the transition, but particularly given what we saw happen on Capitol Hill 2 weeks ago, this is going to take all the more importance when he speaks tomorrow as he is being sworn in as president. Kate.
MJ, John, thanks both very much. And with all this in mind and the inauguration tomorrow, Washington remains a fortress. 25,000 National Guard troops are in the district, which means it's virtually locked down after the insurrection on the Capitol January 6th, and also amid new concern over new threats. The Washington Post reports the FBI is following tips about far-right extremists posing as National Guard members in order to try and infiltrate the inauguration. CNN's Brian Todd, he's live in Washington on just a deserted road. Brian, what are you hearing about these new threats?
Well, Kate, the threats are significant enough, the concern is significant enough that the National Guard is doing more vetting of the troops that are here. You mentioned 25,000 National Guardsmen on the ground here in Washington, D.C. They're giving them more layers of vetting now just to head off any potential for insider threats. But military officials telling CNN and other news outlets they don't have specific intelligence indicating that there are insider threats among the National Guard. And General Daniel Hawkinson, chief of the National Guard Bureau, spoke about that not long ago. Take a listen.
It's not a threat for me. I'm not concerned about that at all. When we look at our National Guardsmen, we vet them throughout the process, and we don't allow extremism of any type in our organization. And when we look at this as a national special security event, the inauguration, this type of vetting is standard with all of these events.
So you've got the vetting of the National Guard, and you've got many, many layers of security. And I'm going to show you an extraordinary one right here. We're on the 14th Street Bridge. What's amazing to look at still is just look behind me. They're letting traffic go from D.C. to Virginia right there, but no traffic coming from Virginia into Washington. Extraordinary, because this bridge is never shut down. It's one of the most heavily trafficked bridges in the entire Mid-Atlantic region. Between these two spans of this bridge and two other bridges, the Memorial Bridge and the Theodore Roosevelt Bridge, about 800,000 cars a day pass over those bridges. But look at this. No traffic coming in here. You've got a snowplow and a police vehicle blocking access there. We're told that the only vehicles being allowed are people who have ID to prove that they live in an area that's accessible from this bridge, or security vehicles. So only a couple of vehicles you see coming across, only a few being let across, but really extraordinary because on a normal day, just the traffic is just streaming through here and it's snarled, frankly. Here's another visual for you. Here's the National Mall, the tidal basin, the Jefferson Memorial over here. Normally you'd see people walking all around the basin, especially around inauguration time. Look at it, it's deserted. Only security personnel, security vehicles, the National Mall completely shut down through inauguration day. The layers of security, the fortressing of this city is just extraordinary right now. These are visuals of this bridge, no traffic on it. I can't tell you, as a person who lives around D.C., how extraordinary it is to see this, Kate.
Yeah. Brian, thank you so much. Coming up for us, we're going to show you live pictures right now of the confirmation hearings that are beginning of 3 of Joe Biden's key cabinet picks. Next, what they are saying about the massive task before them right now. Plus, as
democracy, the terror that you felt, your colleagues, staff, and everyone present will not happen again.
And Kate, the senators here, they're stressing the disarray that DHS has seen during the Trump administration. 6 secretaries of Homeland Security in the past 4 years. But as you noted, Kate, it does not look likely that a lot of these secretaries, cabinet members, will be confirmed by Inauguration Day. They're way behind schedule. And, just to give you an idea, President Trump had 2 confirmed on Inauguration Day. President Obama had, 6 approved on Inauguration Day. So far, Joe Biden is still working to get these nominees out there with a lot at stake here, Kate.
Yeah, no kidding, as we're seeing more and more today. Thank you so much, Jessica. So also Joe Biden's pick to be Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines. She is making clear in her testimony this morning that she sees no place for politics when it comes to the nation's intelligence. Listen.
To be effective, the DNI must never shy away from speaking truth to power, especially when doing so may be inconvenient or difficult. To safeguard the integrity of our intelligence community, the DNI must insist that when it comes to intelligence, there is simply no place for politics ever.
Janet Yellen, Biden's pick for Treasury Secretary, is also speaking out in confirmation hearings, imploring Congress today to go big when it comes to the next COVID relief package.
Neither the president-elect nor I proposed this relief package without an appreciation for the country's debt burden. But right now, with interest rates at historic lows, the smartest thing we can do is act big. In the long run, I believe the benefits will far outweigh the costs, especially if we care about helping people who have been struggling for a very long time.
Joining me right now is Democratic Senator from Maryland, Chris Van Hollen. Senator, thank you for the time. Janet Yellen, it's one thing to hear that from the nominee to be Treasury Secretary, to go big on the COVID relief package. Do you think what she is saying, though, convinces what we have already seen as skeptical Republicans about this?
Well, Kate, it's good to be with you. First, once President Biden is sworn in, there are some measures he can, of course, take immediately through executive action. But you're right. In order to pass the American Rescue Plan, we're going to need Republican cooperation in the Senate, or we're going to have to use a longer process called budget reconciliation. I hope we can enlist enough Republicans who hopefully recognize the urgency of the situation, both in terms of defeating the pandemic and providing economic relief, that we'll be able to do this without having to take the longer process of budget reconciliation.
But, Senator, just on the simple fact of what you're looking at today, it looks like Joe Biden will have 0 of his cabinet secretaries in place when he takes office tomorrow. Are you concerned about what that means? I mean, do you know who the actings are going to be even in charge come noon on Wednesday?
Well, I am concerned about this delay, and it's why, the Senate's going to need to move very quickly to confirm these individuals. I think the president-elect has indicated that the senior civilian officers in these agencies will take the helm until his nominees are confirmed. But it is really important that we move forward quickly to confirm these individuals, given the stakes that we all face.
Well, and look, I also wanted to ask you about the breaking news that we just reported, that these first conspiracy charges have now been filed, federal charges relating to the Capitol Hill riot. This is really the first charges related to the fact that this was planned and coordinated. And the man charged is an apparent leader of the extremist right-wing group, the Oath Keepers. What's your reaction to that?
Well, we have to take these right-wing extremist groups, these white supremacist groups, much more seriously. The FBI identified this as a threat some time ago, but under the Trump administration, it appears very little action was taken. We need to prosecute people who planned this attack. And of course, we also need to hold President Trump accountable. That's what the House did in the impeachment proceedings, because he incited this violent attack on the Capitol, all for the purpose of disrupting the Electoral College vote. So it's going to be very important, Kate, that we pursue all of these avenues and hold people fully accountable.
Can I ask you about impeachment? Part of an impeachment question I have is, let me just play it for you. What Lindsey Graham actually said this weekend about impeachment, and it was his message to Joe Biden on how to handle it.
You talk about unifying the country. If you do not stand up against the impeachment of President Trump after he leaves office, you're an incredibly weak figure in American history. President Trump is trying to heal the nation.
President Trump is trying to heal the nation, Senator. What do you say to that?
Yeah, look, this is really rich coming from Senator Graham, who was one of the people who bought into and spread the big lie that Trump had been cheated out of this election. Lindsey Graham contacted Pennsylvania legislatures. He was part of the effort to overturn the election. So the first measure is Senator Graham and the other sort of co-conspirators in this big lie need to be front and center about the role they played in undermining our democracy and our Constitution. We need at this moment to do two things. We need to make it absolutely clear that this kind of unconstitutional conduct is unacceptable. That's why we will proceed with the trial when we receive the article of impeachment. We also do need to get about the urgent business of defeating the pandemic and getting the economy going. And we can do both. And that is what President Biden wants to do.
A huge task ahead. Senator, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up for us, a veteran of the New York. Right now, more than 90 people are facing federal charges in connection with the deadly insurrection on the U.S. Capitol. Among the latest charged are a former New York City firefighter and an Army reservist with secret-level security clearance. That's just two. CNN's Josh Campbell, he's been tracking all of this. He's joining me right now. Josh, tell us more about these people just charged and the concerns around law enforcement taking part in the attack.
Yeah, Kate, it's clear the FBI is continuing their full court press in trying to identify those who took part in that January 6th Capitol siege. Two people that we're now learning about have been charged include one person named Thomas Fee. This is a 22-year veteran of the New York City Fire Department. He's from Freeport, New York. Now, his charges include violent entry and disorderly conduct. Now, in the criminal complaint, prosecutors allege that he sent a video and text to someone saying that he was at the, quote, tip of the spear of this attack. Now, one other person we're learning about is Timothy Hale Cusinelli. This is a U.S. Army reservist holding a security clearance and a long record of posting extremist views online, according to prosecutors. And he was described to authorities by an informant as an avowed white supremacist, a Nazi sympathizer. This is concerning because so many of these extremists, try to play dress up in military gear. But this is someone who is actually a U.S. Army reservist, which obviously causes concerns for law enforcement about bringing that kind of experience to bear on an attack like we saw. Finally, an update on the woman that we had told you about yesterday and the days prior, this Riley Williams, who was seen on video allegedly directing people around the Capitol. She was also accused by an informant for the FBI, the federal authorities, of stealing a laptop and then possibly trying to transfer that to the Russians for money. No indication yet that was actually, there's evidence to back that up, but she has been taken into custody. So an update there. And one thing thing is clear, Kate, as you look through these criminal charges, one thing that stands out for me looking at this through an investigative lens is just how many investigative tools authorities are using. We're talking about informants. We're talking about scouring digital media. In one case, authorities were actually pulling a surveillance video from a bridge near where one of these subjects lived to determine when he left and when he came back from the Capitol. So a host of resources, a host of techniques, they continue to find and charge these people with that insurrection that we saw on January 6th, Kate.
Yeah, Josh, thanks so much for the reporting. Joining me now for more on this is Brian Levin. He's a former police officer, now the director of the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism. Thanks for coming in. It is striking how many people in positions of trust that are now being investigated and charged for taking part in the riot. Army reservists, police officers, current and former, a person with secret level security clearance. You've been tracking and studying this for quite some time. Does this surprise you?
No, and it doesn't surprise those of us who are in this field. Our friend Eric Ward, who had a beautiful essay recently, Mike German at the Brennan Center, even the Brookings Institution. One of the things that we know with regard to law enforcement is leadership, operations, and culture are all critical components. But here's the problem. The fish rots from the head. And what we had during this administration, listen to this. We have had now black people are 3.5 times more likely to be killed by police if they attacked no one and had no weaponry. So just in the data alone, that's from Brookings Institution, just in the data alone, we know there are issues. But now on top of that, we've had something supercharged, and our research has shown this. When you have, during the last administration, a near cratering of police supervisory interventions by the Justice Department. I think it went from around 24 last administration to 1 during this one. When you populate the highest levels of government, for instance, like the DHS, with someone like Chad Wolf, who refused to testify before Congress on the day that I did, they did not issue documents, they did not show up, and they did not give data at a time when the administration was trying to underplay the threat from white supremacists. What if we underplayed the threat from Daesh? And we knew that there were some, and again, we're talking about a relatively small number of folks. But here's the issue. When we have polls showing millions of people who affiliate with QAnon, and we have, for instance, the head of the Chicago Police Union making virulently anti-Muslim statements, when we had a normalization, a drop in hate crime prosecutions of 38.5%, and no appointments of black federal appellate judges, you talk about systemic racism. It not only affects certainly law enforcement, which has its own history and issues, and I'll tweet at Prof. Levin actual studies and facts because we don't have time right now. But the bottom line is, we had an administration that eviscerated from training to operations to all this stuff and sent a message out. And now we have police from coast to coast, here in California, all the way out to the East Coast, and other public servants who have been involved in this because there's been an elastic reservoir of grievance that the president and other political operatives, along with certain television personalities and the internet, created an ecosystem, and that's where we draw the police from society, and they try to mix. Yes.
So one calling it out and putting a spotlight on it is one step towards stopping it and fixing it. But if we're being honest, it's like extremism hidden in plain sight is what you're really describing, and this isn't going to go away at noon tomorrow when Joe Biden comes into office. Where is it go? Where is it going to go?
We are going to see more of this, unfortunately, and here's why, and thank you so much for that question. We have an insurgency that is going on that now is part of the socio-political landscape. It's big. So when you have an increase of 10% in the number of Americans saying whites are under attack, and we call many of these people who have either cultural or ideological leanings that are intertwined with those who purport to support police but are in fact insurrectionists, some of them racial, some of them conspiratorial, what they end up doing is going on social media and they are recruiting police. And this is an issue. And one thing that we saw, and I testified before Congress about this, spoke to all the big alphabet agencies. They said, even under Trump, we need a whole of government approach with regard to the most prominent, though not exclusive threat facing the United States, that is white supremacy and far-right militancy, which now is going to be more leaner and meaner and underground, and we have to make sure that the police are not further targeted and take these measures with regard to leadership, operations, and culture, because going forward after this big transition event, we are now going to have a rather splintered set under an umbrella of ideological insurrectionists, some Second Amendment, some related to COVID, but they're going to try to ensconce themselves with supportive police and law and order.
Brian Levin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up for us, President Trump, he will leave the White House in much the same way that he entered, torching presidential norms and traditions. What about the letter that so many past presidents leave for their successors? Any chance Donald Trump will manage that? President Trump has spent 4 years shunning presidential traditions, busting through presidential norms, and throwing out presidential values. So it is sadly fitting that on his way out the door, Trump is staying true to form, from the big gesture down to the smallest traditions. He'll be the first president in 150 years to boycott his successor's inauguration. He's also refused to welcome his successor to the White House. The First Lady has refused to invite the incoming First Lady to the White House. All symbols of something that is quintessentially and proudly American, symbols of the peaceful transfer of power from one leader to the next, even down to what is one of my favorite traditions, the personal letter that outgoing presidents leave for the incoming. Donald Trump reveled in the fact that Barack Obama left him a letter in the top drawer of the Resolute desk. He often liked to show it to visitors.
This was the letter given to me by President Obama. So well written, so thoughtful, and in the drawer, put in the drawer, which is a custom, but I doubt too many of them were written in this manner. It took time to do it, and I appreciated it, and I called him and thanked him.
In Obama's letter that he wrote to Donald Trump, he wrote this in part: regardless of the push and pull of daily politics, it's up to us to leave those instruments of our democracy at least as strong as we found them. Does anyone think Donald Trump is leaving office doing that? Sparking a violent insurrection on the Capitol. 400,000 people will have died from coronavirus by the end of the day. Deaths on his watch. So maybe it is no surprise then that Trump, at least so far, has not written a letter to leave behind for Joe Biden. His advisors have encouraged him to consider upholding the tradition. But quite frankly, what sage piece of advice would Donald Trump have to offer Joe Biden? Joining me right now is CNN's Kate Bennett and Jeffrey Engel, the director of SMU's Center for Presidential History. Jeffrey, if I could begin with you, what does it mean if Donald Trump, down to the small gesture that I'm talking about, doesn't leave a letter for Joe Biden?
I think it represents exactly what you were just saying, that this is a president who is not interested in the broader institution of democracy, is not interested in the peaceful transfer of power, which is not just a phrase. It's a basic representation of what we believe as Americans, that the person who holds the office of the presidency doesn't own it. They just hold it for the next person. They keep it warm, if you will. So the presidential letter is a good example of just another way in which President Trump, frankly, I think isn't showing the maturity that he needs to as he leaves office in order to hand it off properly to his successor.
Kate, and it is so much more than the letter. Can you lay out just how President Trump is breaking with every tradition and norm when it comes to the inauguration of his successor?
Well, first of all, he's leaving town. I mean, he's splitting early tomorrow morning. And that, of course, we're used to seeing the arrival of the incoming president and first lady up on those North Portico steps, and the outgoing president comes out and greets them, and then they ride together up to Capitol Hill for the inauguration festivities. None of that's happening. Even in the most contentious elections, there was still that moment of transfer of power so that the country felt, even if it was sort of a photo op, the country at least felt that this was going to be part of the ongoing democracy that this country handles. The Trumps are leaving town. They have not invited the Bidens. The First Lady has not invited Jill Biden over to the East Wing. And likewise, obviously, the president hasn't invited Joe Biden. So certainly tomorrow will look different in that sense from what Americans have really been used to.
Yeah, and I remember seeing Barack Obama and Michelle Obama standing at the White House and welcoming the Trumps there. It's really amazing that they can, even when you're talking about the most contentious of times, Jeffrey, the two people who pushed the birther conspiracy, the Obamas were still going to welcome to the White House because that is what you do. These traditions are about the peaceful transfer of power. For the first time in this country, we did not see a peaceful transfer of power. And Joe Biden's taking over a country that is so divided. What does history tell you about how Joe Biden can go about overcoming this?
Well, actually, history on both points me to the 1933 inauguration, both on the idea that there is a peaceful transfer of power between people who do not like each other and the way that the crisis can form an opportunity. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt took over from Herbert Hoover. The two men couldn't stand each other. They wouldn't even talk to each other in the car ride over to the Capitol. Though it was so cold, they shared a blanket. So the idea that the image was what matters, that the American people needed to see the two of them with the maturity to sit together to transfer power peacefully, even if they didn't like each other personally. But Roosevelt took up office, obviously, during an extraordinary time of crisis during the Great Depression, when people were questioning the very viability of American democracy, I think just as they are today. I think Joe Biden has an opportunity, because of the widespread nature of the discontent, because of COVID, because of the economic collapse, because of the political division in our country, to really just be a fountain of stability, to talk about American values in the way presidents always have before Donald Trump, as something that brings us together. I think Americans want to hear that, and more importantly, I think it'll touch a nerve with them because they've heard it all their lives, and now hearing it again, it'll have a particular resonance and meaning.
Jeffrey, thank you. Kate, thanks. It's great to see you. Coming up for us, CNN has just confirmed that 2 members of the National Guard have been removed from their mission to help secure the inauguration after officials find ties to extremist groups. Breaking details are coming up next. We have some more breaking news. CNN has just confirmed 2 members of the National Guard have been removed from their mission to help secure the inauguration. Let me bring in CNN's Barbara Starr. She has this new reporting. Barbara, what are you learning?
Well, good morning to you, Kate. Disturbing news. In fact, a defense official confirming a short time ago to CNN that 2 Army National Guard troops have been removed from their duties at the inauguration as part of helping to secure Washington, D.C. and the inauguration ceremonies. Now, details are very sketchy. And we want to, first of all, credit our friends at the Associated Press for first reporting this. But there's a lot we do not know. 2 out of 25,000 troops. That's minuscule, yes. But the concern is going to be what these people were up to. We don't know, for example, what caught officials' attention. They're vetting all 25,000. They're going through social media. They're looking for any indication of ties to domestic extremism. What did they find with these people? Was it something perhaps as simple as liking a tweet, signing on to something on social media, or was there something else going on here? We do not know that right now. This is the real challenge for the U.S. military. They want to vet everyone for any sign of ties to domestic extremism, but it's very hard to do unless they basically have an appearance on social media or talk to their friends or verbalize it. Very tough to find these people. So right now, 2 have been removed, and we are still looking for details on exactly why that is. Kate?
Why that is. Barbara, thank you so much for bringing us that reporting, and credit to the Associated Press for breaking that news. 25,000 National Guard troops, though, are in the Capitol right now, as it is a fortress. Thank you, Barbara, so much. Coming up, still, a divided nation, expected pardons, and the Capitol in lockdown. Much more in the final 24 hours of Donald Trump's presidency.